The dust swirled like a vengeful spirit across the main street of Victor, Colorado, as Tabitha Turner stood outside Whitley's general store, clutching her basket with white-knuckled fingers. The whispers sliced through the air, sharper than any knife misses. Hastings and her circle of gossips weren't even trying to keep their voices down anymore. "Poor Vincent Edwards," Mrs. Hastings said with theatrical sympathy. "4 years married to that Barren woman. What kind of wife can't give her husband children?" Tabitha's cheeks burned, but she kept her head high as she stepped onto the wooden boardwalk. At 26, she'd endured these whispers long enough to know dignity was her only shield. The year was 1878, and in a frontier town like Victor, a woman's worth was measured by the children she bore. Without them, she was considered less than whole. "Morning, ladies," she said as she passed the gossiping women, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. The women fell silent, exchanging glances before Mrs. Hastings spoke up. "Tabitha, dear, we were just discussing the church social next Sunday. Will you and Vincent be attending?" Tabitha nodded politely. "Vincent never misses Reverend Miller's sermons, and I've made a new apple cake recipe I'd like to share." "How domestic of you, Mrs. Hastings said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Though I suppose you have time for such things without little ones underfoot." The barb found its mark, but Tabitha refused to flinch. "Good day, ladies." She continued down the street, her back straight as a ramrod even as tears threatened. Tabitha had been married to Vincent Edwards, Victor's most respected rancher, since she was 22. Their courtship had been brief, but passionate. Vincent had arrived from Texas with nothing but his horse, his gun, and dreams of building a cattle empire in the Colorado Territory. Within a month of meeting Tabitha at a town dance, he'd proposed, smitten by her quiet strength and the way her honey-brown hair caught the sunlight. Their first 2 years had been blissful. Vincent's ranch flourished under his careful management, and they built a beautiful 2-story home on the edge of town. But as months turned to years with no sign of a child, the whispers began. Tabitha had consulted doctors, tried folk remedies, and prayed nightly, but her womb remained empty. Vincent never complained, never joined in the town's whispers, but Tabitha sometimes caught him watching the Miller children playing in the churchyard, a look of longing on his face that broke her heart anew. The ranch was a welcome sight after the cruel gauntlet of town. Vincent was in the corral, breaking a spirited Mustang. At 30, he cut an impressive figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. His dark hair, always a bit too long, was pushed back from his forehead as he worked with the horse. "Easy now," he murmured to the animal, his voice a gentle rumble that never failed to warm Tabitha's heart. "That's it. You're learning." Tabitha paused at the fence, watching her husband work. When the Mustang finally calmed, accepting the saddle without bucking, Vincent looked up and spotted her. His face lit up with a smile that chased away the ache of the morning's humiliations. "There's my beautiful wife," he called, striding over to the fence. He leaned across and kissed her, not caring that his ranch hands were nearby. "How was town?" "The usual," Tabitha said, forcing a smile. "Mr. Whitley had that calico fabric I've been waiting for." Vincent's eyes narrowed slightly. "Mrs. Hastings giving you trouble again?" Tabitha looked down, unwilling to burden him with the town's cruelty. "Nothing I can't handle." Vincent reached across the fence, his calloused fingers gentle under her chin as he lifted her face to meet his gaze. "You tell me if anyone mistreats you, Tab. I won't have it. It's just talk, Vincent. Talk can be the cruelest weapon of all." He sighed, then brightened. "Come see what I've been working on. I think you'll like it." He led her around to the back of the barn where, to her surprise, a newly built wagon stood waiting. It was smaller than their regular farm wagon, with a cheerful red paint job and comfortable-looking bench seats. "What's this for?" Tabitha asked, running her hand along the smooth wooden side. "For us," Vincent said, a hint of excitement in his deep voice. "I thought we might take a trip up to Denver next month. There's a theater show I heard about and some fancy restaurants. Might do us good to get away from Victor for a spell." Tabitha's throat tightened with emotion. Vincent always seemed to know when she needed something to look forward to, some respite from the daily reminders of her failure as a wife. "That sounds wonderful," she managed, leaning against his solid form as he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "And," he added, hesitating slightly, "I thought maybe we could visit that doctor in Denver. The one Dr. Patterson mentioned, just to get a second opinion." Hope and dread tangled in Tabitha's chest. Another doctor meant another chance, but also the possibility of having her worst fears confirmed once and for all. "If you'd like," she said softly. Vincent turned her to face him, his expression serious. "Tab, whatever happens, whether we have children of our own blood or not, you are enough for me. Do you understand? You are everything I need." Tabitha nodded, though the doubt must have shown in her eyes. "I mean it," he insisted. "If God doesn't see fit to bless us with children of our own, then we'll fill our home another way." "Another way?" Tabitha asked. "There are orphans who need homes, children who have lost their parents to disease or violence or hard luck. We have love to give and a fine home to offer. That's what matters." The sincerity in his eyes broke something loose in Tabitha's chest. She'd been so consumed by her own failure, she hadn't considered there might be another path to motherhood. "You really mean that?" she asked, hardly daring to hope. "I've never meant anything more," Vincent said firmly. "Now come on inside. Theo made venison stew and I'm starving." That night, as they lay together in their big four-poster bed, Vincent held her close, his fingers tracing patterns on her skin. "I love you, Tabitha Edwards," he whispered against her hair. "Nothing will ever change that." For the first time in months, Tabitha fell asleep without the weight of guilt pressing down on her chest. The journey to Denver took 3 days. They traveled in their new wagon, camping under the stars each night. Vincent made sure Tabitha was comfortable, building her a special seat with cushions and a backrest, packing her favorite foods, and stopping whenever she wanted to admire a particularly beautiful view or wild flower patch. By the time they reached Denver, Tabitha felt more relaxed than she had in years. The city amazed her with its bustle and grandeur, brick buildings 3 and 4 stories tall, gaslight lamps along the streets, and shops selling items she'd only read about in catalogs. Vincent had reserved rooms at the Windsor Hotel, the finest establishment in Denver. Tabitha gasped when she saw their suite, a spacious sitting room with overstuffed furniture, a bedroom with a 4-poster bed even larger than theirs at home, and a private washroom with hot and cold running water. "Vincent, this must cost a fortune," she said, wide-eyed. He grinned, enjoying her delight. "We've had a good year with the cattle. We can afford to live a little." He kissed her forehead. "Besides, my beautiful wife deserves the best." Their appointment with Dr. Franklin wasn't until the following day, so they spent the afternoon exploring the city. They visited a photography studio where they had their portrait taken together, a rare treat. Vincent insisted on buying Tabitha a new dress from a French boutique, a confection of blue silk that made her eyes shine. That evening they attended a performance of The Mikado at the Tabor Grand Opera House. Tabitha had never seen anything so magnificent: the costumes, the music, the elaborate sets. For a few hours, she forgot all about doctors and barrenness and the cruel whispers of Victor. But the next morning, reality returned as they made their way to Dr. Franklin's office on Larimer Street. The doctor was older than Tabitha had expected, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. He listened carefully as she explained her situation, asking questions about her monthly cycles, previous illnesses, and family history. After examining her in a separate room with a female nurse present, Dr. Franklin invited Vincent to join them in his consultation room. "Mrs. Edwards," he began, his voice gentle but direct, "I believe I understand your situation. There appears to be a structural abnormality in your womb that would make carrying a child to term extremely difficult, if not impossible." Though she had suspected as much, having it confirmed made Tabitha's chest tighten painfully. Vincent reached over and took her hand. "Is there anything that can be done, doctor?" Vincent asked, his voice steady. Dr. Franklin sighed. "Medical science has not advanced enough to correct such issues, I'm afraid. There are no surgeries or treatments I can offer that would meaningfully improve Mrs. Edwards' chances of conception or successful pregnancy." Tabitha bit her lip, fighting back tears. "So it's certain, then, I'll never have children." "Nature can sometimes surprise us," Dr. Franklin said kindly, "but I would not want to give you false hope. The chances are indeed very slim." Vincent squeezed her hand. "Thank you for your honesty, doctor. We appreciate having a clear answer, even if it's not the one we hoped for." As they left the doctor's office, Tabitha felt strangely hollow, as if the confirmation had emptied something vital from her body. They walked in silence for a block before Vincent guided her to a small park where they sat on a bench beneath a spreading oak tree. "I'm sorry, Vincent," she whispered, the tears finally spilling over. "For what?" he asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "For not being able to give you children." "For failing as a wife," Vincent's expression hardened. "Don't you ever say that again, Tabitha Edwards. You have not failed at anything." "But no," he cut her off, taking both her hands in his. "Listen to me. When I married you, I didn't marry you for the children you might bear. I married you because I love you, your spirit, your kindness, your strength. That hasn't changed, and it never will. The Bible says. The Bible says many things, including that we should love one another. And I love you, Tab. Whether we have children or not doesn't change that." A fresh wave of tears blurred her vision. "But you would make such a wonderful father." Vincent's expression softened. "And I still can be. Like I told you before, there are other ways to fill our home with children, other ways to build a family." Tabitha looked up at him through her tears. "You really meant that, about taking in orphans?" "With all my heart," Vincent said firmly. "In fact, I've been thinking about it since before we left Victor. There's an orphanage here in Denver that Reverend Miller mentioned. If you're willing, I thought we might visit it tomorrow." Tabitha stared at him, amazed by this man who continually surprised her with the depth of his compassion. "I'd like that very much." Vincent smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Then it's settled. But for tonight, I want you to put aside your worries. We're going to have a fine dinner at that French restaurant, and then I'm going to take my beautiful wife dancing at the society ball we were invited to." Tabitha managed a watery smile. "I'm hardly in a mood for dancing, Vincent." "Which is precisely why we should do it," he insisted gently. "Life goes on, Tab. Different than we planned, perhaps, but no less worth living to the fullest." The St. Vincent's Home for Children stood on the outskirts of Denver, a sprawling brick building surrounded by a high iron fence. As their rented carriage approached, Tabitha's stomach fluttered with nervous anticipation. What would the children be like? Would they resent strangers coming to evaluate them like cattle at auction? The matron who greeted them was Sister Agnes, a stern-looking woman whose severe expression softened when Vincent explained their situation with frank honesty. "So you cannot have children of your own, and you wish to provide a home for one of our orphans," she clarified. "If possible," Vincent said. "We have a good home, a prosperous ranch. Any child who came to live with us would want for nothing." Sister Agnes nodded thoughtfully. "Material comfort is important, Mr. Edwards, but more crucial is love. These children have suffered losses most adults can scarcely imagine. They need patience, understanding, and unwavering commitment." "We understand," Tabitha said quietly. "We're not looking for a replacement for biological children. We want to provide a home for a child who needs one." Something in Tabitha's sincerity seemed to convince the nun. "Very well. The children are at their lessons now, but I can show you around the facility, and then you can meet them during their recreation hour." The tour was sobering. Though clean and orderly, the orphanage was clearly underfunded and overcrowded. Children slept in dormitories with 20 beds to a room. Their clothing was uniform and patched, their toys few and well worn. "How many children are here?" Vincent asked as they walked through a sparse classroom where young boys recited multiplication tables. 117 at present, Sister Agnes replied. "The number fluctuates. Some are adopted, new ones arrive. The influenza epidemic last winter brought us 23 in a single month." Tabitha's heart ached at the thought. "And how many find homes each year?" Sister Agnes's expression grew troubled. "Not nearly enough. Perhaps 20 or 30. Infants and very young children are adopted quickly. The older they get, the harder it becomes." As if on cue, they passed a classroom of older children, perhaps 12 to 16 years old. Unlike the younger children who had regarded the visitors with curious interest, these faces were guarded, even hostile. They had learned not to hope, Tabitha realized. They knew their chances of finding a family diminished with each passing year. "What happens to them when they turn 18?" Vincent asked, his voice tight with emotion. "The boys are usually apprenticed to a trade if we can arrange it, or they find work as laborers. The girls," Sister Agnes hesitated. "We try to place them as maids or shop assistants in respectable establishments. Some marry, others find less savory employment." Vincent's jaw clenched, and Tabitha knew he was thinking the same thing she was: how arbitrary and cruel fate could be, determining which children had families and which were cast adrift. When recreation hour came, they watched from a distance as the children spilled into the courtyard, their behavior transforming from the rigid discipline of the classroom to the natural exuberance of youth. Boys played with hoops and balls, girls skipped rope or played jacks, and the smallest ones engaged in games of tag. "You see any child in particular who draws your interest?" Sister Agnes asked. Tabitha was about to reply when her attention was caught by a commotion near the fence. A small boy had climbed up on the iron rails and appeared to be reaching for something. A kitten, she realized, that was perched precariously on a branch just outside the orphanage grounds. "Thomas Miller, you get down this instant," one of the sisters called, hurrying toward him. But before she could reach him, the boy's foot slipped. He fell backward with a cry, landing hard on the packed earth of the courtyard. Tabitha was moving before she even realized it, crossing the yard swiftly to kneel beside the fallen child. He was perhaps 8 or 9, with a mop of unruly brown hair and freckles scattered across his nose. "Are you hurt?" she asked gently, helping him sit up. He shook his head, but his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I was just trying to rescue the kitten," he said, pointing to the small orange tabby that was now mewling piteously on the branch. Nobody else cared. Tabitha looked up at the kitten, then at the boy's earnest face. "That was very brave of you, but also dangerous. You could have been badly hurt." "I know," he admitted. "But she's scared and alone, and nobody wants her." The simple words struck Tabitha to her core. This boy saw himself in that abandoned kitten, unwanted, overlooked, Vincent had joined them and without a word walked to the fence. With his height, he was able to reach up and carefully extract the kitten from the branch. "Here you go, son," he said, placing the trembling ball of fur in the boy's hands. "You were right to be concerned for her." The boy looked up at Vincent with naked admiration. "Thank you, sir. Can she stay?" "Sister Agnes says animals aren't allowed, but she's so little and she's hungry." Before Sister Agnes could respond, Vincent knelt beside the boy. "What's your name, son?" "Thomas, sir. Thomas Miller." "Well, Thomas Miller, that's quite a coincidence. There's a Reverend Miller in our town of Victor." Thomas's eyes widened. "My father was a reverend, before the fever took him and Ma." Vincent exchanged a quick glance with Tabitha. "Is that so? And how long have you been here at St. Vincent's?" 2 years, 3 months, and 14 days, Thomas replied promptly. "I keep track." Sister Agnes approached, her expression a mixture of resignation and fondness. "Thomas has a habit of collecting strays. I've told him repeatedly that we cannot keep animals here." "The kitten needs a home," Thomas insisted stubbornly, clutching the small creature to his chest. Vincent looked at Tabitha, a question in his eyes. She nodded almost imperceptibly. "What if," Vincent said carefully, "the kitten could come to a place where there's plenty of room for her to run and play? A place with a barn full of mice for her to catch and people who would make sure she's fed and cared for." Thomas looked skeptical. "Where's that?" "Our ranch," Vincent said simply. "In Victor, Colorado." Hope bloomed in the boy's face, quickly followed by caution. "You'd take her." For true," Vincent confirmed. "But there's a condition." Thomas's face fell. "What condition?" "Kittens get lonely," Vincent said seriously. "She'd need a friend to look after her. Someone who understands her and cares about her welfare." He paused. "Someone like you." The boy's mouth fell open. "Me? You'd take me too, if you'd like to come," Tabitha said softly. "We have a big house with an empty bedroom, and I make cinnamon rolls every Sunday morning." Thomas looked from Vincent to Tabitha and back again, as if searching for the trick. "Why would you want me?" "Nobody ever does. The little ones get picked, not boys my age." "Because," Vincent said, "I think a boy who'd risk falling off a fence to save a kitten is exactly the kind of son we've been looking for." Thomas's eyes filled with tears. "Son, you mean? Forever, not just to work on your ranch until I'm grown." "Forever," Tabitha confirmed, her own eyes damp. "If that's what you want." Thomas threw his arms around Tabitha, the kitten squashed between them. "Yes. Oh, yes, please." Sister Agnes cleared her throat, visibly moved despite her attempt at sternness. "This is most irregular. There are procedures, paperwork. Home inspections must be conducted. References checked." "We understand," Vincent said, rising to his full height. "We'll do whatever is necessary, but we'd like to begin the process immediately." The nun studied them for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. Come to my office and we'll discuss what must be done." Thomas looked panicked. "You're not leaving yet, are you?" Tabitha stroked his hair gently. "No, sweetheart. We'll be here in Denver for a few more days, and we'll come visit you every day until the paperwork is ready." "Promise?" he asked, vulnerability written across his young face. "Promise," Vincent and Tabitha said in unison. As they followed Sister Agnes to her office, Vincent's hand found Tabitha's, squeezing it gently. In his eyes, she saw the same overwhelming emotion she felt, the sudden, unexpected blooming of parental love. The paperwork took nearly 2 weeks to complete. Every day, Vincent and Tabitha visited the orphanage, spending hours with Thomas, learning about his interests and fears, telling him about the ranch and Victor, building the fragile bonds of trust that would form the foundation of their new family. They learned that Thomas was smart, but struggled with reading due to letters that seemed to jump around on the page. He loved animals of all kinds, and could identify dozens of bird species by their calls alone. He had nightmares about the fever that had taken his parents, but was too proud to admit it to the other boys. The kitten, whom Thomas had named Marmalade, stayed in Tabitha's hotel room during those 2 weeks, growing plumper and more playful under their care, just as Thomas himself seemed to blossom with the promise of a new home. Finally, the day came when all the papers were signed, all the inspections passed. Thomas, clutching a small bundle of possessions and the now thriving Marmalade, climbed into their wagon, his eyes wide with excitement and trepidation. "Are you ready to go home, Thomas?" Vincent asked as he settled on the bench seat beside the boy. Thomas nodded, then looked at Tabitha, who sat on his other side. "May I? Would it be all right if I called you Ma and Pa? Not right away if you don't want, but someday?" Tabitha's heart felt so full it might burst. "You may call us whatever feels right to you, Thomas. We're family now, no matter what names we use." The journey back to Victor took longer than their trip to Denver, as Vincent was careful to make frequent stops to ensure Thomas didn't become too tired or overwhelmed. They camped under the stars, and Vincent taught Thomas to identify constellations. Tabitha told stories from her own childhood, and Thomas gradually shared more about his life before the orphanage. By the time they reached the outskirts of Victor, a tentative but genuine bond had formed between them. Thomas had taken to calling them Miss Tabitha and Mr. Vincent, which they accepted as a first step toward the more intimate parental titles. "There it is," Vincent said, pointing to their ranch in the distance. "Edward's Ranch, your new home." Thomas stood up in the wagon, his eyes wide as he took in the sprawling property, the 2-story white house with its broad porch, the big red barn, the corral where horses grazed, the vast pastures dotted with cattle. "It's bigger than I imagined," he breathed. "And it's really going to be my home." "Forever and always," Vincent assured him. As they pulled into the yard, the ranch hands emerged from the barn and bunkhouse, curious about the child accompanying their boss. Vincent had sent word ahead about Thomas, but seeing the boy in person prompted a flurry of introductions and welcomes. Theo, their cook, had prepared a special homecoming feast. Thomas, overwhelmed by the abundance of food and attention, grew quiet during the meal, his eyes darting nervously around the unfamiliar setting. Noticing his discomfort, Tabitha suggested they show him to his room after dinner. They had spent the past 2 weeks preparing it, painting the walls a cheerful blue, building shelves for books, and commissioning a special quilt from Mrs. Peterson embroidered with birds and animals. Thomas stood in the doorway, staring at the room in disbelief. "This is all for me, just me." "Just you," Vincent confirmed, "though I suspect Marmalade will claim some territory." As if on cue, the kitten leaped from Thomas's arms and began exploring her new surroundings, batting at the curtain tassels and investigating under the bed. "I've never had my own room before," Thomas said softly. "At the orphanage, there were 19 other boys in my dormitory." Tabitha knelt to his level. "Everyone needs a space that belongs just to them, Thomas. This is yours to arrange however you like, to keep private if you wish. The only rule is that it should be reasonably tidy." Thomas nodded solemnly. "I'll keep it very tidy, Miss Tabitha. I promise." She smiled and brushed his unruly hair from his forehead. "It's been a long day. Why don't you get ready for bed? There's a nightshirt in the dresser and the washroom is just down the hall." After Thomas had washed and changed, Vincent came in to say goodnight, bringing with him a small wooden box. "I have something for you," he said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "A welcome gift." Thomas opened the box to reveal a pocket knife with a polished wooden handle. His eyes grew round. "For me?" "Really, really," Vincent confirmed. "Every ranch boy needs a good knife. I'll teach you how to use it properly and care for it." Thomas ran his fingers reverently over the smooth wood. "Thank you, Mr. Vincent. I'll be very careful with it." "I know you will, son." Vincent hesitated, then continued. "Thomas, I want you to know something. You coming to live with us, it's not charity or pity. It's a blessing to us." He glanced toward the doorway where Tabitha stood watching. "Miss Tabitha and we've wanted a child for a long time. Finding you feels like an answer to our prayers." Thomas ducked his head, embarrassed by the emotion in Vincent's voice. "I'll try to be a good son," he mumbled. "You already are," Vincent assured him, ruffling his hair. "Now get some sleep. Tomorrow I'll show you around the ranch properly." After Vincent left, Tabitha came in to tuck Thomas into bed, a ritual she had dreamed of performing countless times over the years. "Are you comfortable?" she asked, pulling the quilt up to his chin. He nodded, then asked hesitantly, "Miss Tabitha, is it true what Mr. Vincent said about me being an answer to your prayers?" Tabitha sat on the edge of the bed. "Yes, Thomas, it's true. We've wanted a child for a very long time. But wouldn't you rather have had a baby? One that looks like you and Mr. Vincent?" The question pierced Tabitha's heart with its raw vulnerability. "Thomas, look at me," she said gently. She waited until his eyes met hers. "Love isn't about who looks like whom. It's about connection, about finding the people your heart recognizes as family. From the moment we saw you trying to rescue Marmalade, our hearts recognized you." Thomas considered this, his young face serious in the lamplight. "I think maybe mine recognized you too," he said finally. "Is that possible?" "I believe it is," Tabitha smiled, leaning down to kiss his forehead. "Good night, Thomas. Sleep well in your new home." As she turned to leave, his small voice stopped her. "Miss Tabitha, do you think my real ma and pa would be angry that I have a new family?" Tabitha turned back, her heart aching for this child who had lost so much. "No, sweetheart. I think they would be grateful that you're loved and cared for. Parents want their children to be happy, even if they can't be there to see it." Thomas nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Good night, Miss Tabitha." "Good night, Thomas." She closed his door partway, leaving it open enough for the hallway lamp to cast a reassuring glow into the unfamiliar room. Vincent was waiting in their bedroom, his expression a mixture of joy and uncertainty. "You think he'll be all right?" he asked as Tabitha began to unpin her hair. "I think he will in time," she replied. "He's been through so much, Vincent, it won't all be smooth sailing." "I know." Vincent came to stand behind her, taking the hairbrush from her hand to continue the task himself. "But so have you, my love." "Been through much, I mean." Tabitha met his eyes in the mirror. "This feels right, doesn't it? Having him here." "It does," Vincent agreed, his hands gentle as they worked through her long hair. "Like he was meant to be ours all along." The first month of Thomas's life at Edward's Ranch passed in a blur of adjustments and discoveries. There were challenging moments, nightmares that left him screaming in the darkness, stubborn silences when memories of his parents overwhelmed him, instances of testing boundaries to see if Vincent and Tabitha's love had conditions attached. But there were also moments of pure joy. Thomas's face, the first time Vincent let him ride a horse alone, his delight when Marmalade presented him with her first litter of kittens, his concentration as Tabitha taught him to make bread, his laughter during impromptu horse races with the ranch hands who had all become his devoted uncles. The most difficult adjustment, however, came when it was time for Thomas to attend school in Victor. The night before his first day, he was unusually quiet at dinner. "Is something troubling you, Thomas?" Tabitha asked as she served apple cobbler for dessert. Thomas pushed his food around his plate. "What if the other children don't like me? What if they're mean because I'm an orphan?" Vincent set down his fork. "First of all, you're not an orphan anymore. You're Thomas Miller Edwards, and you have a mother and father who love you. But I don't have your name yet, not legally, Thomas pointed out. The adoption paperwork was still being processed through the territorial courts. That doesn't matter, Tabitha said firmly. You're our son in every way that counts, and if anyone says differently, they'll answer to me. Thomas's eyes widened at the fierce protection in her voice. Really, really, Tabitha confirmed. And as for the other children liking you, just be yourself, Thomas. The same thoughtful, kind boy we've come to love. True friends will appreciate you for who you are. The next morning, Tabitha walked Thomas to school herself, aware of the curious stares and whispers as they made their way down Victor's Main Street. Mrs. Edwards, Mrs. Hastings called, hurrying to intercept them. I heard you and Vincent had brought a child back from Denver. How? Charitable of you. The condescension in her tone made Tabitha's spine stiffen. Not charitable at all, Mrs. Hastings. Purely selfish, in fact. We wanted a son, and God led us to Thomas. Mrs. Hastings's gaze raked over Thomas, who stood straight and tall beside Tabitha despite his obvious nervousness. Well, I suppose when one cannot have children of one's own, one must make do. Before Tabitha could respond, Thomas spoke up. Madam, I'm the luckiest boy in Colorado because Miss Tabitha and Mr. Vincent chose me out of all the children at St. Vincent's. They didn't have to make do with anything. Mrs. Hastings blinked, taken aback by the child's forthright defense. Well, he certainly has spirit, doesn't he? He does, Tabitha agreed proudly. Now, if you'll excuse us, we don't want Thomas to be late for his first day of school. As they continued toward the schoolhouse, Tabitha squeezed Thomas's hand. That was very brave, standing up to Mrs. Hastings. Thomas shrugged. She was being mean to you. I don't like that. At the schoolhouse door, Tabitha knelt to straighten his collar. Remember what we talked about. Be yourself. Be respectful to your teacher and try not to worry too much about what the other children think. Thomas nodded solemnly. I will. Then impulsively he threw his arms around her neck. Goodbye, Ma. It was the first time he had called her that, and Tabitha felt tears spring to her eyes as she hugged him back. Have a wonderful day, son. I'll be here to walk home with you this afternoon. As Thomas disappeared into the schoolhouse, Tabitha stood on the steps for a moment, her heart too full for words. When she turned to leave, she found Vincent waiting a few yards away, mounted on his stallion. I thought you were heading to the south pasture this morning, she said, surprised. Vincent dismounted and walked to her side. I wanted to see our boy off to his first day of school. He offered his arm. May I escort you home, Mrs. Edwards? As they walked, Tabitha recounted the encounter with Mrs. Hastings. Vincent chuckled. That's our Thomas, brave as they come. He called me Ma, Tabitha said softly. Vincent stopped walking, turning to face her. In the middle of Victor's Main Street, heedless of onlookers, he took her face in his hands and kissed her tenderly. Of course he did, because that's who you are, the finest mother a boy could ask for. That afternoon, Tabitha waited anxiously outside the schoolhouse. When Thomas emerged, he was deep in conversation with a freckle-faced girl about his age. Ma, he called, spotting Tabitha. He grabbed the girl's hand and pulled her over. This is Lily Stewart. She sits next to me, and she knows all about birds, too. Can she come visit the ranch sometime to see my kittens? Tabitha smiled at the girl. Hello, Lily. You're certainly welcome to visit if your parents permit it. Thank you, Mrs. Edwards, Lily said politely. My pa says your husband raises the finest cattle in the territory. Your pa would be right, Thomas said proudly. Mr. Vincent knows everything about cattle, and horses too. As they walked home, Thomas chattered about his day, the subjects they had studied, the children he had met, the books in the school library. So it went well? Tabitha asked when he finally paused for breath. Mostly, Thomas admitted. Billy Jenkins said I wasn't a real Edwards because I'm adopted, but Lily told him he was an ignoramus, and Miss Thompson made him stay in during recess. Tabitha stifled a laugh at the matter-of-fact recounting. And how did that make you feel? Thomas considered the question. Sad at first. But then, I remembered what you and Mr. Vincent said, that family is about love, not blood. And I know you love me, so I decided Billy Jenkins doesn't know what he's talking about. Tabitha's heart swelled with pride. That's exactly right, Thomas. And for what it's worth, I think Lily Stewart sounds like a very sensible young lady. By the time the first snow fell on Victor that winter, Thomas had fully settled into life as an Edwards. The adoption was finalized in October, marked by a celebration that brought the entire town to the ranch for a feast and dancing. Even Mrs. Hastings had come around, charmed despite herself by Thomas's intelligence and good manners. You've done wonders with the boy, she told Tabitha at the celebration. He's a credit to you and Vincent. We haven't done anything but love him, Tabitha replied simply. He was already wonderful when we found him. That Christmas was the happiest of Tabitha's life. The house rang with laughter as Thomas helped decorate the tree, his excitement infectious. Vincent carved him a set of wooden animals, horses, cattle, wolves, and bears that Thomas declared the finest present any boy ever received. On Christmas Eve, after Thomas had finally gone to bed, vibrating with anticipation for the morning, Vincent presented Tabitha with a small velvet box. Inside was a locket, gold and intricately engraved. When she opened it, she found a tiny photograph of Thomas on one side and Vincent on the other. So you can always keep your men close to your heart, Vincent said, fastening it around her neck. Tabitha touched the locket gently, overcome with emotion. It's perfect, Vincent, thank you. He took her hands in his. No, Tab, thank you for not giving up. For being open to a different kind of family than we planned. For loving Thomas as fiercely as if you'd carried him beneath your heart. How could I not? She asked simply. He is my son in every way that matters. Vincent kissed her, a kiss full of years of shared love and hardship and now shared joy. Merry Christmas, my love. Merry Christmas, Vincent. In the morning, they were awakened by an excited Thomas bouncing on their bed, marmalade clutched in his arms. As they made their way downstairs for presents and cinnamon rolls, Tabitha caught Vincent watching her with a tender smile. What is it? She asked. Just thinking about how full our home is now, he said. Full of love, full of life, full of family. Tabitha leaned into his side, watching as Thomas carefully arranged his stocking on the hearth, speaking softly to the kitten about what Santa might have brought. It's more than I ever dared to hope for. And it's only the beginning, Vincent promised. Who knows how many more children might need a home like ours? The thought sent a thrill through Tabitha's heart, not of anxiety or inadequacy as it once might have, but of joyful anticipation. Their family might grow in ways she had never imagined, but the love that bound them would only strengthen with each new addition. Ma, Pa, come see what Santa brought. Thomas called, his face alight with wonder as he discovered the wooden sled Vincent had secretly commissioned from the town carpenter. As they joined their son by the tree, Tabitha silently thanked God for unanswered prayers and unexpected blessings. The whispers in town had stopped, the pitying looks had turned to ones of admiration. But more importantly, the ache in her heart had healed, replaced by a fullness she had never thought possible. She was not barren after all. Her life, her heart, her home overflowed with the most precious harvest of all, love. 5 years later, the Edwards Ranch had nearly doubled in size and prosperity. The original homestead now boasted a new wing with 3 additional bedrooms, a larger kitchen, and a dedicated schoolroom where Tabitha, who had discovered a talent for teaching, homeschooled not only Thomas but 4 other children who had joined their family. Emma, who had arrived just 6 months after Thomas, was now 12. Her parents had died in a mining accident, leaving her with a pronounced limp from an untreated injury. Quiet and artistic, she had blossomed under Tabitha's gentle guidance, her paintings now adorning every room of the house. The twins, Samuel and Sarah, had come next, 7-year-olds whose mother had abandoned them at the Denver train station with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Now 10, they were inseparable bundles of energy who could ride almost as well as Vincent himself. Baby James, not a baby anymore at 3, had been left on the church steps in Victor during a blizzard, so tiny and blue that Reverend Miller had feared for his life. Vincent and Tabitha had taken him in just until a suitable family could be found. But one look at his trusting eyes had sealed his fate as the newest Edwards. On this particular summer evening, the entire family was gathered on the wide front porch. Vincent sat in his rocking chair, baby James on his lap, reading aloud from Treasure Island while the other children sprawled on blankets, listening with rapt attention. Tabitha moved between the kitchen and porch, bringing out lemonade and cookies, her heart full as she surveyed her family. Thomas, now 13 and nearly as tall as Vincent, caught her watching and winked, a gesture so like his adoptive father that Tabitha had to smile. Of all the children, Thomas had most fully embraced Vincent's mannerisms and values, working alongside him from dawn to dusk on the ranch, soaking up knowledge like a sponge. "Ma," Emma called, "can we go down to the creek after the chapter? Sarah wants to look for tadpoles." "As long as Thomas goes with you," Tabitha agreed, "and be back before dark." As Vincent continued reading, his deep voice painting pictures of pirate adventures, Tabitha sat on the porch steps, overwhelmed by a wave of gratitude. The journey to this moment had been long and often painful, marked by disappointment and heartache. But looking at the faces of her children, who had come to her through paths of loss and abandonment, but who now thrived in the sunshine of unconditional love, she wouldn't change a single step of that journey. Vincent's voice faltered and she looked up to find him watching her, his eyes full of the same wonder and gratitude she felt. "What's wrong, Pa?" Thomas asked. "Why'd you stop?" Vincent smiled, shifting baby James to his other knee. "Nothing's wrong, son. I was just thinking about how blessed we are." Thomas looked around at his siblings, at the prosperous ranch stretching out before them, at Tabitha sitting in the golden light of sunset, and nodded solemnly. "We sure are, Pa, the most blessed family in all of Colorado territory." And as the children clamored for Vincent to continue the story, Tabitha closed her eyes briefly, saying a silent prayer of thanks for the cowboy who had known, even when she couldn't believe it herself, that there was more than one way to fill a home with love.